first word I have been puzzling over Luis Cardinal Tagle's declaration that the Philippines is facing today a crisis of truth. Together with a researcher, I have been trying to divine what he means by the term, or the facts and details that he has marshaled to support his thesis. After the first salvo of media notices, however, the Cardinal has offered nothing in the way of elaboration or explication of such a serious critique of the nation today. The Cardinal made the claim in a letter dated May 13, which he addressed to priests and communities of consecrated persons in his archdiocese. His Eminence lamented how it is almost impossible for one to know which news is true and fake. This crisis of truth has sown seeds of suspicion, mistrust and fragmentation, Tagle said. And the common good, he noted, is one of the first casualties. Even experts on the Constitution, he said, give conflicting interpretations on basic questions of law. The Manila Archbishop declared May 20 to 31 as days of prayer, fasting and action, for truth and common good. During this period, he asked parishes, convents and schools to organize activities for feasts of truth and love to promote the common good, restore trust and reconciliation. You may organize study sessions on the Constitution, on charter change, federalism, etc. with the help of lawyers, law students, or law professors whom the Archdiocese will invite. Tagle's letter read. Tagle also ordered the ringing of church bells every 3 p.m. to commemorate Jesus' death and the praying of the Chaplet of the Divine Mercy in parish churches, chapels, convents, schools, homes, and offices. We accompany our prayer with fasting, he said. Through fasting, we redirect our focus from ourselves and our groups to the community, he explained. Novel and original critique. To the Cardinal's credit, his critique of the national situation is quite novel and original. So far as we can verify from our readings of history, politics and the media, this is the first time that a Filipino leader, whether political, ecclesiastical or cultural, has ventured to speak of his country as facing a crisis of truth. Internationally, no one writing on history or politics has ever used the term crisis of truth. The only volume we could find is an obscure history book by Richard Firth Green, which is curiously titled A Crisis of Truth, University of Pennsylvania Press, England, 2002. The book deals with the life and times of Ricardi in England, the reign of King Richard II, homily versus fake news. For his part, Cardinal Tagle in his Crisis of Truth declaration, appeared to be only embellishing the claims he made in a homily he delivered during Lent this year. In his homily on Maundy Thursday, Cardinal Tagle slammed the continued spread of fake news in the country, almost like a politician in Congress. He intoned, "Let us put a stop to fake news. We are not called and consecrated to bring fake news, only good news, especially through the integrity of our lives," he said. Spreading false information goes against God's call for his people to uphold their mission of evangelization. Evangelization is about good news, not fake news, he said. Evangelization, he said, challenges the faithful to communicate the truth about God's love, especially to the poor. He also expressed sadness that the modern means of communication have been reduced to strategies to manipulate people. Manipulation thrives in the context of disrespect, Tagle said. That's why fake news proliferates, deliberately deceiving people. Given the lapse of time, one would think that the Cardinal's thinking would have gathered more depth to make his new diatribe on the crisis of truth facing the nation more substantive and convincing. Trivializing crisis. In a sense, this casual use of the word crisis to characterize national life trivializes a crisis in the life of nations. In fact, crisis is all too real in the life of a nation. Although crisis of truth has been rarely used, the term crisis has been in different and highly serious contexts, such as crisis of confidence, crisis of conscience, and crisis of faith. A crisis is something that is extremely tense with high stakes. A crisis demands immediate decisions and has serious consequences for the wrong decisions. In medical terminology, crisis has several definitions. It can be a turning point, either for better or for worse, or a severe physical or emotional change. Someone can have a crisis of conscience if he or she has made a decision and now regrets it as immoral or against his or her sense of what is right. Alternatively, a crisis of confidence is when others have changed their opinion of a person or an organization, usually from a good opinion or a bad opinion. An additional example is crisis of faith, when someone who has had strong faith in a set of beliefs begins to question the validity of those beliefs. Those are the three most common phrases, but the term can be applied to anything that includes a drastic change in one's thoughts or emotions, usually from good to bad. Jimmy Carter and crisis of confidence. Jimmy Carter's presidency fell to its lowest point in 1979, ironically when he tried to wrestle down what he called a crisis of confidence in America. In 1979, with energy prices soaring and interest rates spiking, President Carter told an anxious nation in a primetime televised address that the nation was facing a crisis of confidence. People would have to pull together to see the country through its energy problems, Carter said. While never using the word malaise, it became known as the malaise speech, since it reflected Carter's pessimistic view of the country's direction. Before delivering his speech, Carter spent 11 days closeted at the presidential retreat Camp David in Maryland's Catoctin Mountains, meeting with business, labor and religious leaders, as well as leading educators and other politicians. Many Americans, Carter said, viewed the federal government as a stagnant, bloated bureaucracy that was failing to serve the people. The political world, Carter added, was corrupt, inefficient and divisive. Moreover, the president asserted, these problems stemmed from a deeper, fundamental threat to American democracy. The crisis had led to domestic turmoil and the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. Carter also called for a massive commitment of funds and resources to develop alternative fuel sources, including coal, biofuels and solar power. He called on the Democratic-led Congress to approve a solar bank that, he said, would eventually supply 20% of the nation's energy needs. Initially, polls showed that most people responded favorably to Carter's observations. However, in the wake of the speech, after Carter demanded the resignations of several cabinet members, the public mood dimmed. An ensuing widespread sense of a White House cast adrift helped set the stage for Carter's defeat in 1980 by Republican Ronald Reagan. Crisis of truth. A false alarm. Tagle's crisis of truth does not rise in any way to the level of Carter's crisis of confidence. It will strike many as merely a false alarm. Filipinos look at their country today, and they do not see this crisis of truth. They see the Duterte government is performing much better than its critics charge. Fake news is not the monumental problem that Cardinal Tagle perceives. Many are quite confident about knowing what is going on in their country and where it is going. Yanmakabenta@yahoo.com